Baby, too. Mario,
Sorry?
today.
Sì, I am here. Yeah.
Okay,
Full screen?
okay, there you go. Allora, Mario, I'm filling you in a little bit on the nature of this class. This class is about Italian migrations, not that I haven't told you before, but we've kind of approached the class through the representations of Italians from the standpoint of migration. We started with Italian migration and now the immigration to the U.S. and now we are finishing with emigrations into Italy, contemporary life. I mean that sounds like a lot, but it's not that much, is it? Only a century and a half of history. So, you know, like the students are working on their final projects now on San Diego's Little Italy, but we've been anxiously following the news in Italy. And in Europe, frankly, since the bombing at the Bataclan.
Yeah, of course.
So, anyways, so that's where we're at. I just, you know, like we talked a little bit about the immigration laws in Italy, and we touched upon the CIE, the Centri di Identificazione ed
Espulsione.
So I guess I wanted to ask you first to, if you don't mind, introducing yourself to the students.
Yeah, of course. Why not? Okay, I am a freelance photographer, and usually I collaborate with some agency, but usually I am focused on social issues. In particular, in these last years, I have been involved in various long-term projects on migrations and about the migrant communities in Italy, paying particular attention to the cultural aspect of migration. But there are some important steps in my life in order to understand what I am now as a photographer. The first one, when I was in Sicily. I grew up in Sicily. Do you know where is Sicily? Because it's a symbolic place for. It's a symbolic place for because a lot of people come there in the United States, and now a lot of people are coming to Sicily from North Africa, and also Sicily is on the middle of Mediterranean Sea. Historically, the past centuries, during the time, has been conquered by different societies: Greek, Roman, Norman, Arabs. Everyone were coming to visit us, and the result is that you can see this different culture everywhere: the architecture, food, the language, the landscape everywhere, and. So I grew up there, and when I was 17 years old, I took part to a development cooperation project in Tanzania, and it was a classic project where we were building an hospital in a small village of Tanzania, and I spent there just 1 month. But you know, when you are a teen, you live your experience in a different way, with some filters, and maybe your life, is more intense. And so after this experience, I decided to study African history and development cooperation, and I moved in Naples. And but during my study, sorry.
Ti sei spostato più a nord, you moved north.
Yeah, I have been to live in Naples for the university. I lived there for 6 years, and during my study, I understood that the African cultures were arriving in Italy through the migrants, and so really I became interested in migration during my studies, and before to be a photographer. And this time was important for my professional development. I was collaborating with several organizations in order to support the migrants. And with this experience, I had a chance to observe the migrants community and also to know how in these last years the Italian society and also the urban spaces are changing. And this time was important and preparatory for my work as a photographer. And so after my degree, I decided to become a professional photographer. And I moved in Rome, where I am based now, and I graduated in documentary photography and photojournalism. And I decided to become photographer because I am just curious, and for me, the photography is just a good excuse to enjoy the experience, to know people, to have access to different contests that I would not have entered without being a photographer. And currently, I am still collaborating with some association, in particular with the Archive of Migrant Memories, is a based Rome association. Was formed in 2012 and founded by Italians and migrants. And the association brings together a group of migrant, non-migrant volunteers, researchers, media operators, filmmakers, in order to record the migration traces in the collective heritage of Italian memory. And so for me, sorry, Clarissa?
No, I was going to say the Archive of Migrant Memories, we haven't actually mentioned in this class, but we had Dagmawi Mayor come to San Diego State last year and the previous year, and I know he's a co-founder of the Archive of Migrant Memories. And
yes.
So I just wanted to mention that there was on the syllabus a movie called Like a Man on Earth, which we haven't done, but that would have been by the founder of the archive that is talking about. And so, and in my Italian class, we will be covering the work that that type of archive does, which is, of course, important in the Mediterranean, but has ramifications and implications also for other borders, right? I mean, and we are a border town here in San Diego, so that is relevant as well for us. The topic of migration for us is quite site-specific as well.
Yeah, and for me it's important collaboration with the archive because it's a kind of therapeutical things. I mean, usually I work with the mass media or I collect the story of other people and then I tell the story to the audience. And the association use, for me, is the most important thing, is a kind of a narrative common space or narrative sharing space where there is a continuous exchange among Italians and migrants, trying to go over the normal relation between the listener and the narrator. This is important for me, but also for the researchers, for all people around the association. And so, this is my life, briefly.
Do you have questions for us before we bombard you with our questions? Sai delle domande per noi?
Ah, for you? I don't know. No, I was interested. Now I am working a project about Italian immigration among New York City, London, and Buenos Aires. But really, I don't know about the Italian immigration in San Diego. You were talking about some Little Italy there.
Yeah, that's right. Is anybody up for it?
Would you tell something about this? Or?
About what?
About Little Italy, San Diego.
All right.
How is Italian immigration pertinent and relevant in San Diego?
Okay. how is it pertinent?
No. Yeah, but
Okay.
yeah,
Well, so the Little
Can
Italy.
you introduce yourself?
Okay.
To
My
you
name
don't
is.
know him, but it's-
Okay. My name is Jamie Steckbeck. I'm a sophomore student here at San Diego State. I'm talking a little bit about Little Italy. So, most of the people came to San Diego, the Italian culture, from San Francisco after the earthquake of 1904, I believe. 1906. Okay, 1906. Thank you for the help. But so most of them came down here to settle, and so I mean, basically like any other
What
little.
were they doing? Why did they come to San Diego other than?
Well, they came down to San Diego for fishing primarily. There's a lot of canneries down here in San Diego, and they did a lot of tuna fishing. My grandfather actually had his own boat down here in San Diego, and he was a tuna fisherman. So that's what they did primarily. But they also had a lot of attractions down there. They had the San Diego Padres, which is a MLB, like a professional baseball team in San Diego. What else? Can someone else provide?
The two primary regions where the community in San Diego came from were from Sicily and Porticello in Sicilia, non so se conosci il paesino.
Yes, it's close to my town. It's a small town of fishermen, yeah.
Yes, esatto, e Riva Trigoso in Liguria, near Genova. So,
Wow.
yeah, so that's the historical community is, was made up. There were, of course, many other regions represented, but primarily those were the two. And then what happened?
The highway.
No.
Or
Then World War II happened,
or then the highway.
la seconda guerra mondiale, e poi then there was, so basically the Little Italy became known as Little Italy only in the 90s, really. Before it didn't have that name, and the name has been applied for commercial value.
Yeah.
Little Italy didn't mean anything to the people who lived there. For them, it was all they knew. So yeah. So that's a historical portion of the Italian migration, but of course there's a lot more people of Italian descent now in Italy. People like myself who do professional work, and also people who work in restaurants. We had an exodus. We had Luca Bullo as a guest here. I don't know if you've seen or heard of his movie Influx. About Italians
no.
in London. He was talking about Italians in London nowadays.
Okay. But now there are new immigration in these places, or not?
Say this again. What is the question?
If the Italians are still living there, or there are new migrants arriving and living there?
No, in Little Italy, in the area that's known as Little Italy, there are people that can afford to live there. No, there aren't that many Italians. There's a lot of restaurants and shops and stuff like that. Did I say that?
Well, I thought the guy was talking about how there were more Italians across the country who wanted to move there because they thought that was a great Italian community. And he was talking about the family that moved from Italy to San Diego, Little Italy, to open a restaurant.
Yes.
And they had the same website, they just translated it when they moved to the U.S. Yeah. So it made it sound like there were people who wanted to be more part of an Italian community there. Yeah.
Can you make sure Mario understood that, because the microphone's over here?
Oh.
Did you understand that, Mario?
Yeah.
I can see it.
Yes, less, but.
Guys,
was far. And no, I was asking this because in London, in the Little Italy of London, but also in the Little Italy of New York, there are many Italian restaurants but are managed by other people coming from East Europe, for example. and the Italians are living in other places, in other neighborhoods of London or New York. And
it is very similar. I would say it's like a global trend of ethnic parks. You know, like the idea of the Little Italy as an ethnic park where.
Yeah, something folkloristic.
It's totally marketed to the tourists, I'd say, or to the locals as the tourists.
Right.
Okay.
All right.
Can I was wondering, could we ask questions on your CIE photography? So one of the questions that I had for you is, how was it like to be, because like it seemed like for a while the CIE camps, like no one could go in there, no one could really photograph like what was going on. How was it like to get granted access, but get granted strict access into the CIE camp?
It's quite hard to work there because you need an authorization by the police. The prefectura is the headquarters of police, and I worked for 4 years, but I ever been inside 6-7 times because the authorization the time was really long, and when I was working inside, I was kept under strict and constant supervision by police, and usually the staff were highly directive and escorted me around like I was on a kind of safari, pushing me to speak me in. Sorry?
No. The safari part is kind of along the same line as the ethnic park.
Yeah. And so they were pushing me or the other journalists to speak with detainees who were more controllable and close to staff. But in the last year, the center staff has been more keen to have journalists visiting the center, so they are more soft in their approach to supervision. But it depends to the center where you are. But during my first visit was in Ponte Galeria, Rome. I felt as if I was stepped into a non-country, a kind of painful limbo, where human rights are suspended, and I found the center to be disorienting, especially for the people inside. And this because the people held are lost in confusion, pain, and fear. And usually inside the situation is very tense and nervous, and you need to spend time talking with them before to start to shoot photos. And especially they need to talk because they have not so many external contact with the society, just someone who has his family in Italy, and sometimes the activists or the lawyers or the journalists are the only one external contact they have. So it was really difficult also because you need kind of confidence connection with them to trust them. But every time I was coming back there, or people were expelled, there were new people. So usually inside you can find two kinds of people: the people that don't want to talk with journalists, don't want pictures, or people that want to tell their story. They are open to the journalists or also the activists inside the association working there. And I think to be held in the center is devastating, especially for the inability to understand the reasons of detention. And the purpose of my general project isn't to give technical detail about the center, but to bring the audience inside these structures. And I started just from some questions I had, especially in order to understand the daily life inside, the relations among detainees or among them, the internal staff. And I found several answers, but not the main one, that is what the centers are. I don't know yet, and this because it's very difficult to give an exact definition of this place, because it's a kind of extrajuridical no man's land.
Thank you. Going off of that question, would you say that a lot of people were open to talk to you about their situations, or would you say that for the most part people weren't open to talk to you?
No, they were talking with me. It was difficult because sometimes the police were controlling us. Sometimes it depends. If the situation is inside this tense, the police doesn't want contact between journalists and prisoners. But in other situation was more easy to talk with them. And we collect photo, video, audio. Also, some of them won the recourse against the expulsion, and me and other people met them outside the centers.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Oh, I had a question. You can't see me. But, guys, move the microphone.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
I can kind of read it.
Okay. So it looks like the women and the men were separated when they were staying in the centers. What would you say is the biggest difference in how the women deal with the situation as opposed to the men?
Okay, usually men, the situation inside is something kind of geopolitical displacement of people inside in the different groups. I mean, usually men are divided in different groups, reflecting the different countries inside, and sometimes these groups collaborate, sometimes they are in conflict. You know, people are tense and something said in the wrong way could be pretext to quarrel. And also women saying their own group, but never the family groups are in conflict, I think. And sometimes men react with violent protests, hunger strike, suicide attempts. And for example, 2 years ago, 13 men saved their own lips as a sign of protest for avoid their expulsion. And the mass media in Italy were talking about that, and then they won and moved to France to live there. And also for women, it's hard and devastating to stay there, but usually they don't react in a violent way. In Ponte Galeria, I found something really surprising, because while men were setting fire to everywhere, women were painting the wall and the rooms of their section with many colors and flowers. And this is a beautiful and touching form of resistance too. But this doesn't mean that for family it's easier to be held in the center. They live the same detention conditions of men, and also they need to resist inside. We must consider it that some of them have been divided from their children, or some of them have suffered violence during their trip to reach Europe, and also sexual violence too. So the question.
Hey, Mario, I had a question.
You
talked about how, you were kind of under constant supervision from, the police and the guards in the center. Were there any areas that they were just this is totally off limits, you can't come here? Or were there any photographs that you took that they were, concerned about, I guess?
No, okay, it depends. Okay, if the police don't want that journalists enter inside, they don't give you the authorization. But if you you get the authorization and you are inside, then you can take picture everywhere. Okay, sometimes there were, 10 policemen around me and escorted me around, but they never stopped me when I was taking pictures. If we were going in some room, I was taking picture, or maybe they sometimes didn't permit me to visit some place inside some room inside the chair, but no, it depends to the situation. Sometimes we were, I don't know, 20 journalists. There was also Al Jazeera, Rai News, is the national Italian television channel, and imagine 20 journalists with the camera, photo camera. There was a big confusion. Sometimes it was the police was bringing us around, visiting the place they could show us. Sometimes in the confusion I was escaping and taking some other picture, but
it just depends who's doing it.
yeah.
I had a question about the aesthetics of your exhibition. I noticed all of the photos were in black and white. I was wondering if there was a particular reason you decided to present all the photos in black and white versus color.
Usually, I choose to use my picture in black and white or in color in the beginning of my works, and it's something instinctively. I don't know. It depends what I am feeling inside me, visiting the places, talking with people, and obviously when I was in the CIA, I don't know, simply I decided to use the black and white. I don't know, maybe because the situation was really dramatic and was really, I was feeling a big disorientation inside. So I didn't think too much about this, but usually it depends on my work, and in this case I decided to use the black and white.
If I can follow up on that question, Mario, because the video that you made with Lassad that accompanies the exhibition, basically, it's all in black and white because you are using your pictures. But at the very end, and which is sort of the surprising part of the video, you are filming him in colors. That means something.
Yeah, the final, and I think for me it was a kind of interpreted like a kind of openness. I mean, there's the color at the end and the flower, the pillow with the flowers and the colors, and I was thinking also the colors of women inside the sanders. Is the life that is going forward, and also if the people live this dramatic situation, there is something that anyway is surviving, and so I decided to leave Lassad with the colors. It was something positive in this negative situation, a positive message for me.
Yeah.
Mario, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
With bringing attention to the CIE camps, you and other journalists, would you say that this is a political move as well to portray it in this way, to hope for better days for immigrants and better conditions for them as well, or what was your main reasoning behind it, of making this presentation and other people trying to bring attention towards the CIE camps?
And you are talking about in general why I decided to involve this.
Yeah, in general.
Work. Because when the situation inside is really, really dramatic, you can have any political position about immigration, but you can keep this kind of structure and the people living this bad conditions. And this is happening in Rome, close my house. Sometimes my friends were watching the picture. They were saying me, but is it in Africa? Where is it? Is it really in Italy? Anyone know this kind of center in Italy until some years ago? And so I decided anyway to enter inside, and after the first time I decided to continue my work. And it's really difficult because the mass media, the newspaper, it's difficult they publish this kind of work. But anyway, I am working with some association and the university in a different way. But I think it's also something ethical. I am a photojournalist. I have to talk about this.
Okay, thank you.
Also, it's difficult to publish this kind of work because in Italy the mass media is particular the way in which the mass media talk about the migration in Italy.
Well, my question was kind of similar, but have they thought about eliminating the CIEs altogether and finding a more humane way to deal with deportation and things like that?
Sorry,
can you put into effect?
Can you repeat, please? The voice was jumping.
Sorry, have they thought about getting rid of the CIEs altogether and finding a more humane way to deal with deportation and immigration? Like, is that being put into effect at all?
Puoi tradurre, Clarissa, che non ho capito bene? Grazie.
Lei mi sta chiedendo se pensano di chiudere il CIE, se non è il caso di trovare degli altri modi più umani di gestire la questione migrazione.
Oh, well, no, they are not talking about to close the center. And obviously, like everything in this world is a political problem because only Parliament have the opportunity to close the center. But for now, no, they are open other kind of structures. They are the hot spot to expel the migrant directly on their arrival. And we had the new government, the left center, and they reduced the length of the detention. Before was up to 18 months, and now is for a maximum of 3 months. But probably in the next weeks, the Italian government will extend it again to 18 months. We don't know now, but we are waiting for. But anyway, they don't want to close the center. Maybe they are changing the typology of this kind of structures. For example, now there are these hotspots where the migrants are identified on their arrival, and if they are identified as an economic migrant, they are expelled in 48 hours, and this is a really short time. They are expelling now also potential asylum seekers.
Mario, there used to be, like, in the plans, they had, like, more CIEs, and now, like, maybe half of the ones that they had planned, that the government said that they were opening, are actually in function. Is that correct? That there are different, there's only a few centers?
No, they don't want to open new centers, and the number of centers in Italy always is changing. Sometimes they close some center and then they reopen. It depends on the political situation at that moment. And in Lampedusa, for example, the change was identification center, the first time, then become center for first aid, and now is a hot spot to expelled. There's a kind of conversione of this kind
Where
of.
are they expelled to? Where do they
to
send
their,
them to? 'Cause some of them.
to their country of origins. They are deported. Okay, they are deported back to their country usually using a special flight by Frontex. Frontex is an European agency which leads and coordinates the interforces patrol along the European borders, and so they are expelling back to their country of origin, to Nigeria and Morocco and Tunisia, everywhere. And of course not the Syrians, because the Syrians are escaping away from a clear war, but the Nigerians, for example, have a lot of problems to enter in Italy. And 1 month ago they expelled 15 women that probably they were escaping from sexual violence from Nigeria.
Yeah, so basically they're putting their lives even more so in danger, while paying for it. I mean, I'm assuming this has a cost as well, the expulsion, no?
Yeah. Okay. The problem also in the identification center, there are also some potential political asylum, and this is another particular topic and huge problem in Italy. Briefly, the status of political asylum, it depends from the commission, the court, that is evaluating the application process and the personal story of the migrant. Sometimes it's difficult for migrants to prove an individual risk in his personal life. For example, it's easier for Syrians to get asylum because they are escaping away from a terrible war and the situation is clear. It's more difficult for people coming from countries that are supposed to be pacified, like Eritrea, for example. Also, if there is a dictator, or people escaping from religious or ethnic persecution, because perhaps the judge has no idea about that. The migrant which is asking for the asylum maybe landed in Lampedusa without documents or proof about his story. And we know with the association example of people who come in Italy in a group of 5 or 6 people, all of them running away from the same team, but then 4 or 5 get the political asylum and 1 or 2 people not, perhaps because that day the judge was different and he has evaluated the candidate in a different way. But this is a real complex situation because the different judges interpret and apply the law in a different way. And the problem is we have the law is full of empty space. So also it's difficult for the lawyers to avoid this expulsion. For them, they have more technical tools to defend a criminal or a serial killer than a migrant in Italy.
I have a question. This topic of the CIEs and like immigration in general, how like well known is like the average Italian citizen aware of it? Like, is it a growing awareness, or is everyone known about it, or is like how does that happen?
You are talking about the public opinion.
Yeah. Like how well aware is the public of they're aware of the situation?
Okay, in the last year something is changing, but the mass media in general is a kind of strange beast. I mean, they feed on what they produce. They produce a collective imagination about the social issues. At the same time, they are influenced by what they think the news reader wants to find in the newspaper or in the television. And also in Italy, there are a lot of political controls in the newspaper and the television. And usually, in general, in Italy, the media speak of migration by placing the migrants specific general topic or frame, such as, for example, the landings in Lampedusa, connected to the idea of a cultural invasion or disparate poor arriving from Africa, or inside some, or about some the crime chronicles and the potential terrorism connection, or the idea that each migrant could commit a crime, would be a potential terrorist, to be dangerous for the civil society. Or if it's something positive, the media talk about some successful football player in a gossip way. And in the last year, sometimes the mass media were preferring positive stories on migrations and not about the CIA, for example, because for them the Italian audience was already depressed because of the economic crisis. So you can imagine how can be hard to propose some work like this, photographic work like this, to some newspaper. And but in the last year, something is changing. The newspaper are taking attention to different dynamics, and especially after the Paris attacks, some politicians, some opinion leader was starting some battle against the Muslim, and but the Italian newspaper was defending the Muslim community in Italy, and so maybe something is changed. But anyway, it's a particular topic in Italy. It's not too easy to talk about. Something. Maybe they talk about the landings in Lampedusa or the people dying in the sea, but no other kind of stories.
Mario, can I ask, make another comment, because you said you are now moving with your work toward looking at Italian migration abroad again, London, New York, and Buenos Aires.
New York and Buenos Aires.
So, and you've noticed that a lot of the owners of restaurants or people who work in those Italian restaurants are in fact not Italian, right?
Yeah.
But isn't it the case as well in Italy? Like I come once a year to Italy and I go to, usually I go to tourist destination, let's put it this way, just because I'm bringing the students. But a lot of the people in those restaurants also are not Italians. I mean, there are, sort of the notion that in Italy, migrants would be either only criminals or on the fringe of society and not in your own restaurant kitchen doing work. It's also preposterous in many ways. So I just was wondering whether, you found that correlation as well in terms of, because what the media doesn't cover a lot of times is what it is that they're doing, that a migrant does on a daily basis for a job. I mean, we focus on those who don't have a job and don't have the legal papers, but the majority of them do.
Yeah, because the residence permit is connected to the work, the illegal work, and in this last 15 years, the migrants are supporting the Italian economy, but working in an illegal way, working in the farm, for example, or in the restaurant, in the kitchen, but never. Some journalists try to talk about it. In general, they talk after the Sarno. Do you know what's happened in Calabria some years ago when there was but usually they don't speak about this. And but well. And which kind of connection you were asking, Clarissa?
I just wanted to point out that, like you're saying, even the comment you've just made about the like these migrants being forced to take, jobs that are not, that are under the table, let's say, pays that are under the table. But isn't that how 3/4 of the Italian economy works? For Italians as well?
Yeah, I think something like this, especially now in the last, 5 years, I don't know, many Italian youngsters are leaving Italy, going to London or abroad. It's really impressive how many Italians are living in London. You can listen Italians everywhere, in every corner, on the street, in the restaurant, everywhere. And but so the migrants are working in these empty places in Italy, but almost all of them are working illegally without a normal legal contract.
Yeah. And, yes, Jenna, go ahead.
I was just wondering, what are some of the restrictions that are placed on lawyers who are trying to defend the migrants? I noticed that you said that Italian law kind of puts heavy restrictions on them, so I was just wondering what those exactly were.
Sorry?
I was just wondering, what are some of the restrictions that Italian law places on lawyers who are trying to defend the migrants?
Yes, for them it's really hard because they have no juridical tools to defend the migrants. There's some association of lawyers that is working hard in the CIA, but it's really difficult to avoid their expulsion. And the situation is really dramatic because in the center we have more or less three kind of typology of detainees, and one of them is migrants who have been living in Italy for many years, along with their families, whose children were born in the country, and after losing their job, they cannot renew their resident permit, and if stopped by the police, they are detained in the center and expelled to their country or region. And the number of families divided by this mechanism is terribly high, because when the father or the mother is expelled, the other members of the family continue to stay in Italy, or children, for example, may be entrusted to a center for minors. And for the laws, it's really hard to fight this system, this situation.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if it's clear.
Right, I was wondering if, do you think that the economic situation in Italy kind of has a direct relationship to how the public responds to things like these centers? Like, do you think as the economy improves that people won't be, they won't be likely to be okay with these sort of centers? And as the economy maybe isn't doing so well, that they sort of turn to the immigrants and blame them? Does that would you say that relationship is there?
Yes, of course, the problem is there's the economic crisis, or some politician or some opinion leader will say that the problem are the migrants, that we are in economical crisis and we can help these people. But really, how I told you before, these people are working here in Italy, are supporting our economy, and so there is a connection between the economical crisis and the public imagination of migration and imaginary of migration. And but it's also amazing because a lot of people arriving in Italy are moving in other countries because they don't want to stay in Italy because there is no job or it's illegal. Well, anyway, it's very hard to find job.
But this is, Mario, this is also a problem within the EU, that, the idea that migrants come to Italy to stay is a false idea. Oftentimes, Italy is just, in their mind at least, a country of passage, right, where they are not intending to stay, but obviously geographically it's at the south of Europe. So, like in the way in which the EU has also been operating has been they have to claim residency, right, in the country of arrival. Is that the case?
Yeah, because if they arrive in Italy and they leave the fingerprint, they have to stay in Italy. They can move in Germany or and until some year ago, Italy wasn't just a transit place, but in the last year, obviously the situation in North Africa and Syria, Italy became the door of Europe, like Greece and other places. And but now they understand that it's really difficult to stay in Italy. They won't just arrive to Norway, Sweden, or Germany. But it's difficult because the European system is completely blocked, because if they arrive in Italy, they have to stay here. And the Italian government doesn't support them with some social kind of welfare or something like this. Maybe they work illegal, they sleep on the street. It's difficult, the situation for them.
One or more last questions. Let's sort of. I'm starting to wrap up a little bit, Mario, so you can go to bed. Or wherever you need to go. I mean, let's not get that or something. Are you aware of these centers in other parts of Europe? Because obviously Italy
yes.
is not the only one. So could you tell us a little bit about what's going on in other countries? Okay,
this is a European problem. It's not an Italian problem, because we can find situations like this everywhere, in France, Germany, everywhere. And the situation now, of course, Paris is setting this kind of policy against the migrants. In Italy, people are shocked about Paris and scared. The underground metro, the metro station of Rome are full of soldiers every day, and Rome is hosting the Jubileo and could be a symbolic target. But I think that already before the Paris attack, the military action seems to be the only one plausible option to solve the migrant crisis for European governments. And during the past few months, before the attack, we have seen no man's land being created along the European border. And again, the dividing walls have reappeared in Europe after decades. And we have again barbed wire, soldiers everywhere. And obviously, the aggression of Paris is reinforcing these dynamics, and also some xenophobic extreme right party. But especially in this time, all of us need mental lucidity to understand clearly the situation. And of course, Italy is not an exception. Italy has its own front line and sustaining its battle against migrants through the identification center. And but it's a common situation in all parts of Europe.
Are there other questions that we want to ask? Mario, noi ti lasciamo andare. We are
you sure?
Are you really sure? Grazie mille. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For your time. We'll check in again next semester. answer in Italian, my friend.
Okay, just one thing. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate in this discussion. Good luck for your academic file, and thank you to you, Clarissa, for make possible everything. And thank you also to the technician, Trevor, and the technical, logistical things.
Grazie Mario, noi ci sentiamo per email, we're going to send you email. Thank you so much.
Sì, volentieri. Thank you too. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Can we move into our room for a second so that we wrap up our... Today is the last day of class, and I hope there's anxiety but, you know, withdrawal of anxiety.
I don't think you're alone.
I don't think you're alone.